Black billionaire cries at his daughter's grave, not knowing she's alive and secretly watching him. You ever stand somewhere so quiet, so utterly still, that you can hear the echoes of your own heartache? A silence so profound it presses in on you, a physical weight that threatens to crush the very breath from your lungs? That's where we find Frank. Not in the gleaming towers of his empire, not amidst the roaring engines of his private jet, but here, kneeling, broken, before a name etched in stone, a name that once filled his world with laughter, with light, with a joy so pure it felt like a miracle. His shoulders, friend, they shook with a grief that had hollowed him out, tearing his very soul in two. Each shudder was a testament to the unimaginable pain of a father who believed he had lost his little girl, his precious princess, to the unforgiving depths of the ocean. He didn't just cry, he collapsed. His tears, hot and relentless, traced rivulets down his face, then landed on the cold, unyielding marble, dissolving into a despair so profound it had no words left to give. It was a despair you could almost taste in the damp air, a sorrow so deep it seemed to silence the very birds in the trees. He was a titan, Frank, a force of nature. John Harrison, the man they called a black billionaire, had built an empire from the dust and dreams of nothing. From the factory floor, from the janitor's closet, he clawed his way through every barrier, every sneer, every doubt. He defied poverty, laughed in the face of discrimination, and forged a legacy that stretched across 12 states. Harrison Estate, a name synonymous with success, power, and unshakable will. His name, etched in the hallowed pages of Forbes and Business Insider, wasn't just ink on paper. It was a promise kept, a mountain conquered. But here, in this silent field of eternal rest, none of that mattered. Not the billions, not the accolades, not the empire. Because 6 months ago, everything that truly mattered, everything that gave meaning to those achievements, had been consumed by a different kind of fire. Not the crackling flames of ambition, but the terrifying inferno of a tragic accident. A yacht, my friend, a beautiful vessel, a symbol of his success and his love for his family. A joyride planned for his new wife, Joan, and his cherished daughter, Princess. A family getaway that ended in chaos, in wreckage, in unspeakable loss. By the time the Coast Guard arrived, by the time the divers searched the cold, dark waters, there was nothing left. Nothing but debris, wreckage, and the chilling, unyielding truth of an empty ocean. The official report was stark, brutal in its finality. A sudden, catastrophic structural failure, a yacht swallowed by the sea. And with it, they believed, his 9-year-old daughter, Princess. The funeral, a sea of over 500 faces, a testament to the man Frank Harrison was, to the life he had built, to the devastating loss he had endured. But even among that sea of grief, Frank stood alone. The man who had conquered every obstacle, every Goliath in his path, had been utterly, absolutely destroyed. Can you imagine, dear friend? Losing 30 pounds in the blink of an eye, the weight of grief a heavier burden than any fortune. His once powerful frame, sculpted by discipline and drive, now seemed hollow. His custom-tailored designer suits, once a second skin, now hung loose, flapping on shoulders that had forgotten the very posture of strength. His head, a strategic fortress, was bowed. He hadn't stepped foot in his office in months. The empire he built now run by his brother, Mark, who handled the day-to-day operations. His new wife, Joan, a woman he had only married a year before the tragedy, moved through the sprawling mansion like a ghost, managing the household, ensuring he ate, slept, and took his medication. A fragile porcelain doll of a woman, seemingly as shattered as he was. But Frank, he didn't really see her. He saw only the void. Every single Saturday morning, like a ritual carved from his agony, Frank would drive to Oakwood Cemetery. He would kneel. He would weep, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for hours. The groundskeepers, good souls, learned to leave him be, to let him drown in his sorrow. This Saturday it was no different. The air was thick with the scent of dying leaves, a morbid perfume that perfectly matched the desolation in his soul. He lowered himself onto the grass, the cold earth biting at his knees, and traced the letters carved into the stone with a finger that trembled like an autumn leaf. Princess Grace Harrison, beloved daughter, forever 9. His voice, ragged and raw, broke the cemetery's sacred silence. I'm so sorry, baby girl, he whispered, a sob tearing from his chest. Daddy is so sorry he couldn't save you. Oh friend, if only he knew. If only he knew the shattering, heart-stopping truth that hung in the air, just a few yards away. Because what Frank didn't know, couldn't possibly know, was that the daughter he mourned, the child he believed was lost to the cruel sea, was not dead. Not at all. She was alive, and she was standing right there, hidden behind the ancient, gnarled shadow of an old oak tree, less than 20 feet away. 9-year-old Princess, the girl everyone believed was a watery ghost, stood watching her father, shivering, not just from the cool autumn air, but from a terror that froze her very marrow. 6 months of captivity had etched a different kind of pain onto her young face, a secret so explosive, so devastating, it could obliterate everything if it ever came to light. Was this a miracle, my friend, or was it the insidious beginning of a new, unimaginable nightmare? Because Princess, our sweet, brave princess, was carrying a truth that would shake Frank Harrison's world, and ours to its very foundations. 6 months. 6 agonizing months, my dear friend. Can you even fathom what that means for a 9-year-old child? For Princess, it wasn't a period of growth or discovery. It was an eternity spent in an abandoned farmhouse, deep within the tangled, whispering woods. A place so remote, so forgotten, it felt like it existed outside of time itself, almost 2 hours from the vibrant city Frank had built his life in. Her prison was a single, small room, a thin, lumpy mattress on the floor, an old, chipped bucket in the corner that served its grim purpose, and a window innocent enough in any other context. But here, it was a cruel mockery, nailed shut, barricaded against any glimpse of the outside world, of hope of escape. Her world, once filled with the warmth of her father's embrace and the playful ease of childhood, had shrunk to suffocating walls. She learned the rhythms of her new, terrible existence. A man whom she knew only as the guard, a hulking shadow, would bring her meager meals twice a day, always the same, always bland, always delivered with a metallic clang as he locked the door behind him. She didn't know his name, didn't know her name anymore in this place. She didn't know where she was, not really. All she knew, all she could remember with a terrifying clarity, was the night of the fire, the blinding flash, the acrid smoke, the jarring hands, the sudden, dizzying sense of being drugged, snatched from her very bed, carried away into an abyss. And then, waking up in this desolate, forgotten room. But even in the deepest despair, the human spirit, especially a child's spirit, seeks survival, seeks understanding. Princess, our brave little girl, studied every agonizing detail of her captivity. Her young mind, forced to mature beyond its years by the cold hand of fear, became a meticulous observer. She learned the guard's routine, the precise cadence of his heavy footsteps as he patrolled the creaky floorboards. She memorized the exact rhythm of his drunken snoring on Saturday nights, a sound that often lulled him into a stupor before midnight. She knew the location of every groaning board, every squealing hinge, the exact spot where the back door to the farmhouse stood, a tantalizing whisper of freedom just beyond her reach. 6 months of sheer terror, of constant vigilance, had sharpened her senses in ways no child should ever have to experience. It was a crucible, shaping her from an innocent girl into a silent, watchful survivor. And then, 3 weeks ago, a miracle, or what felt like one. The key. The guard, in his drunken haze one Saturday night, had dropped it. It slid silently, impossibly, under the door, right into her room. a tiny, metallic glint of hope in the suffocating darkness. Princess, with a heart hammering like a trapped bird against her ribs, hid it. Beneath her mattress, a secret weapon. She waited for the right moment, for the perfect alignment of stars and shadows, for a Saturday night where the whiskey fumes hung thickest in the air, dulling his senses to oblivion. And last night, my friend, last night was that moment. She slipped out, through the back door, while the guard snored, oblivious, lost in his drunken slumber. The smell of cheap whiskey was a stench she would carry with her forever, a symbol of her escape. Then she ran, through the dark, unforgiving woods. Branches clawed at her face and arms, leaving angry red welts. Roots, gnarled and treacherous, bit into her bare feet, leaving trails of blood on the damp earth. She had no phone, no map, no compass, no idea where she was truly going. Only fragmented memories, etched into her young mind during the few terrifying times she had been moved from one clandestine location to another. The subtle curve of the hills, the faint, distant hum of highway traffic, the silent guidance of the stars, these were her only guides. By dawn, she had reached the edge of the city, exhausted, starving, terrified, but alive, and with only one thought, one desperate, burning need, to find her father, to find Frank. But she couldn't go home, could she? She couldn't just knock on the door, burst back into the life that had been snatched from her. Why? Because during her captivity, Princess had overheard things. Fragments of hushed phone conversations between the guard and someone he called the boss. A woman's voice, cold, businesslike, speaking through a speakerphone. A voice Princess recognized with a jolt of icy fear. It was Joan, her stepmother. And one conversation, just 2 weeks ago, had pulled back the curtain on a truth so horrifying, so utterly monstrous, it made the darkness of her prison seem like child's play. "He's getting weaker," the guard had reported, his voice a low rumble. "The medication is working. A few more months, maybe less." And Joan's reply, crisp and chilling, echoed in Princess's mind. "Good. Once he's gone, we inherit everything. Just make sure the girl stays hidden. We might need her later." Princess, a child of 9, didn't fully grasp the sinister implications of medication or inherit. But she understood enough. More than enough. Her father was being poisoned. Her stepmother, the woman who offered him comfort, who managed his household, was slowly, deliberately, systematically killing him. And they were keeping her alive as some twisted form of insurance. She was a pawn, a bargaining chip, a terrible, living secret. She couldn't go to the police, my friend. Who would believe her? A 9-year-old girl, covered in dirt and scratches, with no proof, no witnesses, just a terrifying story? They would call Joan. They would send her home. And then, she knew with a chilling certainty, she would disappear again. This time forever. So Princess came to the only place she knew her father would be, the only place he had faithfully visited for 6 months, the cemetery, the place where he believed she lay buried. And now, hiding behind the ancient oak, she watched him sob. The man who had once seemed invincible, who had carried her on his shoulders, who had promised to protect her from anything, looked utterly, irredeemably broken. His shoulders shook with each cry. His hands trembled as they touched the cold stone. And Princess, our brave, silent witness, felt her own tears fall, hot and silent. She wanted to run to him, to throw her arms around him, to bury her face in his strong chest and tell him she was alive. But fear, a cold, unyielding hand, held her back. What if someone was watching? What if Joan had people following her father? What if revealing herself meant death for both of them? She stood frozen, caught between the terrifying clutches of terror and the overwhelming pull of love. Then he spoke, a whisper, raw with despair, that sliced through the silence of the cemetery and shattered her hesitation. "I can't do this anymore, Princess," Frank whispered to the grave. "I can't keep living without you." Maybe it's time I join you. And in that moment, my friend, something snapped inside Princess. Her father wanted to die. He was giving up. And if she didn't act now, she might lose him forever. Not to Joan's poison, but to his own crushing despair. She stepped out from behind the tree. Daddy. The word came out as barely more than a whisper, but in that profound, sacred silence, it carried like a thunderclap. His body, friend, went rigid, every muscle locked, every nerve screaming in disbelief. For 6 long months, Frank had heard that voice, that sweet, childlike whisper, Daddy. It had haunted his dreams every night, echoed in the hollow chambers of his empty house, whispered in the quiet moments just before sleep. He had imagined it in bustling crowds, in silent, empty rooms, a phantom limb, a phantom voice. It wasn't real, couldn't be real. This was just another cruel trick of his shattered mind, another torment from the relentless grief that had become his only companion. Slowly, painstakingly slowly, he turned. And there she was. My dear friend, imagine that moment. Standing before him, thin, grimy, her once perfectly braided hair now a tangled, matted mess, her once vibrant clothes torn and stained. But it was her. Unmistakably, impossibly alive. Princess. The world tilted on its axis. The air rushed from his lungs. Princess. The name tore from his throat, a choked gasp that was more pain than sound. It wasn't a whisper now. It was a desperate cry from the deepest well of his soul. It's me, Daddy. It's really me, she said, her young voice still fragile but unwavering. And in those words, the nightmare fractured. The impossible became real. Frank scrambled to his feet, a man who had forgotten how to move with anything but crushing sorrow, now propelled by a force beyond understanding. He stumbled, nearly falling, in his haste to cross the distance between them. 3 unsteady steps, and he was on his knees again before her. His hands hovered over her small shoulders, as if afraid she might dissolve, a beautiful, cruel mirage. This isn't real, he breathed, his voice raw with a disbelief that warred with a desperate, burgeoning hope. You're not real. I'm dreaming. I have to be dreaming. Oh, the agony of believing something so precious could only be a phantom. But Princess, with the wisdom of a child who had seen too much, understood. She took his trembling hands, calloused from years of building an empire, and pressed them against her own tear-streaked face. Her face warm, living, real. I'm real, Daddy. I'm alive. They took me. They kept me locked up, but I escaped. I'm here. And then, my friend, the dam broke. Not just hers, but his. The floodgates opened. John Harrison, the invincible billionaire, pulled his daughter into his arms, holding her so tightly he could barely breathe. His powerful body, once stiff with grief, now shook with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than sorrow. It was a sound of pure, overwhelming relief, mingled with a rising tide of rage, confusion, and a desperate, desperate love. My baby, he kept repeating, his voice muffled against her hair. My baby girl. Oh God, my baby girl. They held each other for what felt like an eternity. Father and daughter reunited in the shadow of a grave that was, and always had been, a lie. A lie designed to break them both. When Frank finally pulled back, his eyes were red, his face wet with tears, but something profound had shifted in his expression. The broken man from moments ago was gone. In his place, a hardness, a dangerous glint, had begun to form. His voice was low, controlled, but Princess could hear the chilling fury simmering beneath it. Who did this? He asked, the words barely a whisper, yet vibrating with an unspoken threat. Who took you? Where have you been? I'll kill them. I swear to God. I'll kill them with my bare hands. He was no longer just grieving. He was a sleeping giant awakened, a force of vengeance stirring. Princess, sensing the dangerous turn, gripped his hands tightly. Daddy, listen to me, she pleaded, her young voice carrying a wisdom far beyond her years. It was Joan, and someone else. I don't know who, but I heard his voice on the phone. They're poisoning you. The medication you're taking, the tea she makes you, it's killing you slowly. They want your money. Frank's face, which had been pale with grief, now went stark white. Joan? That's impossible. She's been taking care of me. She's been. Princess, with a strength that belied her age and her recent trauma, interrupted him. She's been killing you, Daddy. I heard them talking. They said, a few more months, maybe less. Daddy, you have to believe me. For a moment, Frank simply stared at his daughter, the girl who had left him 6 months ago. Sweet, innocent, sheltered. The girl standing before him now had eyes that had seen too much darkness, survived too much horror, grown up too fast. And in that gaze, he saw not a child telling a wild tale, but a survivor, a witness. He believed her. He believed every horrifying word. God help him, he whispered, the words a prayer and a curse. We're going to the police, he said, standing abruptly, a new resolve hardening his voice. Right now we're going to. But Princess grabbed his arm, her small hand surprisingly strong. No, Daddy, we can't. If they find out I'm alive, they'll kill us both. They have people. The man who guarded me, he'll tell them I escaped. They're probably already looking for me. If we go home, if we go to the police, if anyone sees me. She didn't have to finish the sentence. Frank felt his simmering rage collide with a terrible, chilling realization. His daughter was right. He couldn't simply expose Joan and her accomplice. Not without putting Princess in immediate mortal danger. These were people who had staged a fire, faked a death, kept a child prisoner for half a year. They would not hesitate to kill again. Then what do we do? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The question laced with a despair that was quickly being replaced by a terrifying clarity. Wow, what a story. Are you feeling the shift, my friend? The profound relief, swiftly followed by the cold, hard reality of the danger they're in? Frank is no longer just a grieving father. He's a man reborn with a dangerous purpose. We're setting the stage for the strategic counterattack. Let me know your thoughts and don't forget to drop your favorite emoji. Princess looked up at him, my friend, and in her eyes, those same eyes that had seen too much darkness for a child of 9, there was something new, something profound. Beneath the fear, beneath the trauma, there was a spark, a fire of determination that reminded Frank, strikingly, of himself. The very same drive that had built his empire from nothing. We have to be smarter than them, she said, her young voice resonating with an unexpected authority. We have to make them think they've won, and then we have to destroy them. Imagine, if you will, the weight of those words, spoken by a child who had endured the unendurable, who had escaped the inescapable, now asking her father to rise and fight the very people who had tried to destroy them both. Frank knelt before her again, his large hands carefully, reverently, placing themselves on her small shoulders. His voice, now quiet, held the raw honesty of a man stripped bare. I spent 6 months wanting to die, he confessed, his gaze locked with hers. I thought I had lost everything, but you came back to me. You survived when no one thought you could. And now you're telling me we have to fight. He pulled her close, pressing his lips to the top of her head, a silent vow passing between them. I won't let them hurt you again, Princess. I don't know how yet, but I promise you we're going to make them pay for what they did. And we're going to do it together. For the very first time in 6 months, my friend, Princess allowed herself to feel something other than fear. She felt hope, a tiny, fragile bud of hope, but hope nonetheless. Frank drove them away from the cemetery, using only back roads, his mind a furious, intricate web of possibilities. He couldn't take her home. The mansion was a viper's nest. He couldn't check into a hotel. Princess's face, believed to be that of a victim, had been on every news channel for weeks after the yacht tragedy. Someone somewhere might recognize her. He needed help. Immediate help. Help from someone he could trust absolutely, without question, without hesitation. And in his entire life, spanning decades of cutthroat business deals and treacherous landscapes, there was only one person who fit that description. David Mitchell, his personal attorney for 20 years. They had met when Frank was a struggling developer, scrapping for his first big deal, and David was a hungry young lawyer, desperate to prove his worth. Over 2 decades, they hadn't just built a professional relationship. It was a genuine friendship, forged through late nights, hard-won battles, and secrets exchanged in the deepest confidence. Secrets that, if revealed, could have shattered everything. Frank trusted David with his life. And now, with princesses. From an abandoned gas station, clinging to the grimy metal of a payphone, Frank made the call. No cell phone, no traceable signal. "I need you to meet me," he said, cutting straight to the chase, no preamble, no niceties. "Alone. Don't tell anyone. Don't ask questions until you see me." To David's immense credit, he didn't hesitate. Not a single pause. "Where?" An hour later, David's car, sleek and silent, pulled into the desolate parking lot of a closed warehouse on the forgotten outskirts of the city. When he stepped out and saw Frank standing beside a thin, disheveled girl, his face drained of color. "My God," David breathed, the words barely a whisper. "Is that?" "It's Princess," Frank confirmed, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. "She's alive. She's been held captive for 6 months. And the people who took her are the same people who have been slowly poisoning me." Frank told David everything. The horrifying truth of the kidnapping, the faked death, Princess's harrowing captivity, the chilling overheard phone calls, Joan's monstrous involvement. As Frank spoke, David's expression shifted like shadows across a storm-tossed landscape, from shock to horror to a cold, calculated fury. "If we go to the police now, they'll contact Joan immediately," David said, his legal mind already racing through the implications. "Standard procedure in missing child cases. And you're right. Without concrete evidence, it becomes your word against hers. A grieving widow versus a man who might be suffering from delusions brought on by trauma." The bitter truth hung heavy in the air. "So what do we do?" Frank asked, his voice tight. David was quiet for a long moment, his sharp legal mind working furiously, dissecting scenarios, weighing risks. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and firm. "We set a trap, but it has to be perfect. One mistake and you both end up dead." The plan began to take shape over the following hours, intricate and dangerous as a spider's web. Princess would stay at David's private apartment, a small, unassuming place he kept in the city for late work nights, known to no one but his accountant. She would remain hidden there, completely off the grid, a ghost in the urban landscape, while Frank returned home. He would resume the charade. "You have to act normal," David instructed, his voice grave. "Weak, grieving. Let Joan think her plan is working. But whatever she gives you to drink or eat, find a way to dispose of it without her knowing. And then we gather evidence. I'll get you recording equipment, small cameras, audio devices. We document everything." And then, David met Frank's eyes, his gaze unblinking. "You're going to die." Frank understood immediately. A fake death. A carefully orchestrated demise. Joan and whoever she was working with, they were waiting for him to die so they could inherit everything. If he died suddenly, they'd rush to claim their ill-gotten gains. They'd get careless. And that, my friend, that was when they would be exposed. It was risky, terrifyingly so. It was dangerous. But it was also the only plan that might actually work. The only way to save Princess and to reclaim his life. Frank knelt before Princess, who had been listening silently, intently, throughout the discussion. "I have to go back to the house," he told her, his voice heavy with the unspoken danger. "I have to pretend like none of this ever happened. It might take weeks, and you'll have to stay here alone, waiting for me. I know that's asking too much after everything you've been through." Princess's eyes glistened, the tears welling, but her voice was steady, unwavering. "I survived 6 months in that room, Daddy. I can survive a few more weeks if it means we win." Frank pulled her into an embrace, fighting back his own tears. His 9-year-old daughter, this child of incredible courage, possessed a strength that shamed most adults he knew. He didn't deserve her unwavering spirit, but he would honor it. "I'll come see you whenever I can," he promised, his voice choked with emotion. "And this will end. I swear to you, my baby girl, this will end." The following 3 weeks, my friend, were the hardest of Frank's life. And that's saying something, considering the 6 months of hell he had already endured. He returned home, resuming his role as the grief-stricken widower, playing a part in a deadly game. And Joan, with her practiced concern, greeted him, utterly unaware that the ghost of her past and her monstrous betrayal was about to come calling. "Now how's that, my friend? Do you feel the meticulous detail of the plan, the quiet heroism of Princess, and the steely resolve of Frank? We've set the stage for the gathering of evidence and the chilling reveal of the deeper conspiracy. Sit tight." Frank returned home, my friend, and stepped back into a nightmare draped in luxury. The mansion, once a haven of warmth and family, now felt like a gilded cage. Every surface Joan had touched, every room where her false smile had once held sway, seemed tainted. He resumed his role as the grief-stricken widower, a masterful performance honed by 6 months of genuine despair. And Joan, ever the actress, greeted him with practiced concern. Her voice soft, her touches gentle, an insidious mask hiding the monster beneath. Each morning, she brought him tea, steaming and fragrant, a daily ritual laced with poison. Each evening, she prepared his dinner, seemingly an act of wifely devotion, but in reality, a carefully measured dose of slow, agonizing death. But Frank, our reborn titan, was no longer a victim. He was a hunter, with a steely resolve fueled by the image of his daughter's brave, traumatized face. He found ways to dispose of everything she gave him. The fragrant tea would vanish into potted plants when her back was turned, a silent, deadly offering to the unsuspecting foliage. Food, scraped surreptitiously into napkins, would disappear down the toilet, a grotesque parody of a meal. His days became a meticulous, dangerous dance of evasion. He was always watching, always waiting. He installed the cameras David had provided, tiny, almost invisible devices nestled within smoke detectors, picture frames, and electrical outlets, turning his own home into a surveillance hub. He wore a recording device, a silent confidant, hidden beneath his clothes whenever Joan was near, capturing every hushed word, every casual cruelty. And slowly, painstakingly, the evidence began to accumulate. It was like watching a venomous serpent uncoil, revealing its true nature piece by agonizing piece. He captured Joan on the phone, her voice a low, impatient drone, discussing how much longer he, meaning Frank, might survive. He recorded her complaining about the delay, about how she was tired of playing nursemaid to a dying man. Each word a venomous dart, piercing the facade of her grief. He documented the small amber bottles, hidden in her closet, labels carefully removed, their unknown contents a chilling testament to her insidious plot. Every small detail, every casual utterance, every calculated act of care, was now a damning piece of the puzzle. But the most damning evidence, my friend, the most gut-wrenching betrayal, came 10 days into his surveillance. It arrived in the form of Mark Harrison, Frank's own brother. Frank had always known that Mark harbored a quiet resentment towards him, a simmering jealousy that had always felt like a dull ache, never a mortal threat. Growing up, Frank had been the ambitious one, the driven one, the golden boy. Mark, by contrast, had drifted through life, always taking shortcuts, always making excuses. When Frank built his empire, he had, out of a misguided sense of family loyalty and perhaps a touch of guilt, given Mark a position as chief financial officer. He had never imagined that his brother's jealousy ran deep enough for murder. But there it was, captured in crystal-clear audio, a recording that would haunt Frank's waking hours and his tormented sleep. Mark and Joan, sitting in the living room, oblivious, believing Frank was asleep upstairs, discussing their monstrous plans. "The doctor says he's deteriorating faster now," Joan reported, her voice devoid of emotion, a clinical assessment of a dying man. "Another month, maybe 6 weeks. Mark's reply, devoid of any familial affection, was a chilling, casual "good. I'm tired of waiting." And then, the words that twisted the knife deep into Frank's heart. "Once he's gone and we get the inheritance, we can finally get rid of the girl, too. She's a loose end. We'll deal with her after the estate is settled. For now, she's our insurance policy, just in case anyone questions whether her death was really an accident." Frank listened to that recording in David's car later that night, his hands shaking not just with rage, but with a profound, soul-deep revulsion. His own brother, his own wife, conspiring to kill him, and eventually to murder his daughter. All for money. The depths of human greed, my friend, sometimes beggar belief. "I want to destroy them," Frank said, his voice a low, dangerous growl, barely controlled. "You will," David assured him, his own face grim with disgust. "But we do this right. We do this in a way they can never recover from." 3 weeks after Princess's escape, the meticulous preparations were complete. Frank Harrison died. The plan, dark and daring, was executed perfectly. David had brought in a trusted doctor, a man who owed Frank his life after Frank had funded his daughter's cancer treatment years ago. Together, they would orchestrate the final, breathtaking act of this deadly play, the billionaire's death. Are you feeling the tension and the growing horror, my friend? We're now on the precipice of the death itself. Let me know your thoughts. Do you think as Frank's staged demise sets the ultimate trap, will they fall for it again? The plan, my friend, was executed with chilling precision. 3 weeks after Princess's harrowing escape, after Frank had meticulously gathered every damning piece of evidence, a carefully orchestrated collapse unfolded in the Grand Harrison home. It was a performance for the ages. Joan, ever the consummate actress, called 911 in hysterics, her voice a theatrical tremor of grief. Paramedics, swift and efficient, arrived, rushing the supposedly ailing Frank to the hospital. 2 hours later, the trusted doctor, a man bound by an unspoken debt to Frank, emerged with the grave news. John Harrison, the indomitable black billionaire, had suffered a massive heart attack. Despite their best efforts, he could not be saved. The death certificate, a cold, official pronouncement of a lie, was signed, and to prevent any awkward questions, any prying eyes that might uncover the subtle traces of poison, the body was cremated, ashes to ashes, a final, irreversible act that sealed the deception. Within hours, the news exploded across the nation. Headlines screamed, "Black billionaire John Harrison dead at 45. Real estate mogul succumbs to heart failure after months of grief over daughter's death." The public mourned, social media flooded with tributes to the man who had built an empire, the man whose heart, they believed, had simply broken under the weight of an unbearable loss. Joan played her role masterfully. She wore black, the epitome of the grieving widow, a veil of sorrow expertly draped over her calculating mind. She wept for the cameras, her tears, though practiced, convincing enough to sway the masses. She spoke movingly about her beloved husband's broken heart, how he had never recovered from losing Princess. "I watched him fade away," she sobbed, "despite my best efforts to save him." Beside her, at the press conference, stood Mark, his face arranged in a solemn mask of grief, speaking in hushed tones about the brother he had loved and lost. A chorus of public sympathy swelled, showering the grieving widow and the bereaved brother with condolences, completely unaware of the monstrous conspiracy lurking beneath the surface. Meanwhile, in the quiet, unassuming sanctuary of David's apartment, Princess watched the news coverage flicker across a small television screen. Her father, a ghost to the world, sat beside her, his arm a reassuring presence. They watched Joan's performance, Mark's feigned sorrow, the endless tributes. "They think they've won," Frank said quietly, his voice devoid of emotion, a dangerous calm settling over him. Princess leaned against his shoulder, her small hand finding his. "They haven't," she whispered, her voice a promise. "No," Frank agreed, his grip tightening on her hand. "They haven't." The waiting, my friend, was agony. From his hiding place, Frank meticulously monitored Joan and Mark's movements through the cameras that still pulsed with silent life in his home. He watched them, a chilling tableau, celebrating with champagne the night after his own funeral. He listened as they openly discussed which properties they would sell first, how they would divide the vast fortune, what they would do with their new freedom. With Frank gone, and the world believing Princess was dead, their caution evaporated, replaced by a reckless arrogance. They spoke openly about their crimes. They called the guard, a man named Ree, who had held Princess captive, instructing him to clean up the farmhouse, to remove any trace of her imprisonment. They even discussed the timeline for dealing with Isabella, their pet name for Princess. Once the estate was settled, once their inheritance was secure, Frank documented everything, every careless word, every chilling instruction, every arrogant laugh. David, working tirelessly, built the case, a mountain of irrefutable evidence. The date for the inheritance hearing, the formal transfer of Frank's immense assets, loomed large. For Princess, those 2 weeks in hiding, even in safety, were a different kind of torture. She was fed. She had a warm bed. But she was alone for hours at a time while David worked and her father perfected their vengeful symphony. The nightmares came every night, dreams of the dark room, the locked door, the guard's heavy footsteps. She would wake up gasping, reaching for a father who wasn't there, having to remind herself over and over again that she was free, that this was almost over. But the fear, my friend, the lingering dread, never quite left her. What if something went wrong? What if Joan discovered the truth? What if her father's fake death became tragically real through some unforeseen accident? She kept these fears to herself, adding to her burden, knowing her father already carried too much. So she waited. She watched the news. She counted down the days until she could finally stop hiding, stop being a ghost. The inheritance hearing, a grand stone building in the heart of the city, was about to become the stage for the most explosive reveal of their lives. The inheritance hearing, my friend, was held in the solemn grandeur of the downtown courthouse, a magnificent stone building, steeped in 100 years of legal battles, now poised to witness the most audacious one of all. Outside, media trucks lined the street, satellites pointed skyward, reporters jostling for position. The death of a black billionaire and the disposition of his vast fortune was national news, a story everyone wanted a piece of. Inside the courtroom, Stella, our Joan, sat at the plaintiff's table, draped in elegant black, dabbing at her eyes with a delicate silk handkerchief, a performance for the ages. Mark sat beside her, his expression appropriately somber, a perfect pantomime of grief. Their attorneys, slick and confident, had prepared all the necessary documents. The will, the death certificate, the impeccable proof of marriage and blood relation. The judge, a man of gravitas and experience, reviewed the paperwork with meticulous care. Everything, to all appearances, was in order. John Harrison had died, they claimed, without recent changes to his will, making his wife and brother the legal heirs to his immense estate. If there are no objections, the judge announced, his voice cutting through the hushed tension, I am prepared to authorize the transfer of assets to the surviving family members. Joan, a subtle, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips, reached for the pen. Her hand was steady. Why wouldn't it be? Everything had gone exactly according to her monstrous plan. Frank was dead. Princess, Isabella, was hidden away, a loose end to be dealt with, and the fortune she had spent years cultivating was finally within her grasp. She signed her name with a flourish, a triumphant stroke. Mark, a small, arrogant smile finally escaping his lips, signed after her. The judge reached for his stamp, ready to seal their ill-gotten victory. And then, my friend, the world changed. The courtroom doors burst open. Every head turned. Cameras swung. Stella's pen clattered to the table, the sound like a gunshot in the sudden, stunned silence as the color drained from her face, leaving her ghost white. And there, framed in the doorway, stood Frank Harrison. Alive, tall, his eyes burning with a cold, righteous fury. And beside him, holding his hand, was Princess, the daughter everyone believed had died in a fire 6 months ago. The courtroom erupted. Reporters shouted. Cameras flashed. Spectators leaped to their feet. But Frank's eyes, searing with vengeance, never left Joan and Mark, who sat frozen at their table like deer caught in blinding headlights. I think, Frank said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence like a razor, there may be some objections after all. David Mitchell entered behind him, accompanied by 2 FBI agents, a thick folder of evidence clutched in his hand. He approached the bench, his voice calm, steady, and devastating. Your Honor, I represent John Harrison, who is, as you can see, very much alive. I am also presenting evidence that Stella Harrison and Mark Harrison conspired to kidnap Mr. Harrison's daughter, fake her death, and slowly poison Mr. Harrison in order to inherit his estate. He placed the folder, a silent testament to their meticulous work, on the judge's bench. We have video recordings, audio surveillance, and testimony from the man they hired to hold Princess captive. We request that both defendants be taken into custody immediately. Joan finally found her voice. She leapt to her feet, her composure utterly shattered. This is insane, she shrieked. That's not possible. He's dead. She's dead. I watched her burn. Frank's voice, cold and devoid of mercy, cut through her frantic denials. Did you, Joan? Or did you just assume your plan worked? He looked at his brother, who still hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, seemingly incapable of doing either. You were gonna kill me, Mark. Your own brother. For money. Mark's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out, his face blank with shock. The FBI agents moved forward. One approached Joan, who backed away, still screaming denials, her mask finally falling away to reveal the raw, undiluted hatred beneath. You should have just died, she spat at Frank. You were supposed to die. This was supposed to be mine. Frank said nothing. He simply pulled Princess closer, shielding her from the chaos, watching as the woman who had tried to destroy his family was dragged away. The cameras captured everything. By nightfall, the story was on every news channel in America. Black billionaire rises from the dead to expose family betrayal. 9-year-old survivor helps father take down would-be killers. News vans camped outside the Harrison estate. Interview requests flooded David Mitchell's office. But Frank refused them all. He had no interest in being a spectacle. The only thing that mattered now was his daughter. But even with their enemies behind bars, my friend, the battle was far from over. The wounds Joan and Mark had inflicted went deeper than poison and imprisonment. They had scarred something fundamental in both father and daughter. Their ability to trust, to feel safe, to believe that the world wasn't full of people waiting to hurt them. The first night back in their home was the hardest. Frank had considered selling the estate, starting fresh somewhere without memories of betrayal lurking in every corner. But Princess had asked to see her old room, and he couldn't deny her that. They walked through the front door together, Princess's hand clutching his. The house looked the same, elegant and spacious, but it felt different now, contaminated. Princess stopped at the foot of the stairs, staring up towards her bedroom. I don't know if I can go up there, she said quietly. Frank knelt beside her. You don't have to be strong anymore, he said softly. Not with me, not ever again. Whatever you're feeling right now, scared, angry, sad, it's okay. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Princess's composure cracked. The tears she had been holding back for weeks finally broke free, and she collapsed into her father's arms, sobbing with all the fear and pain she had kept bottled inside. Frank held her there, on the foyer floor, rocking her gently, letting her cry until there were no tears left. He didn't offer empty reassurances or try to fix what couldn't be fixed with words. He simply held her, letting her know through his presence that she was no longer alone. They didn't go upstairs that night. Instead, they made a bed of blankets and pillows in the living room, sleeping side by side, just as they had when Princess was small and afraid of thunderstorms. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't practical. But it was what they both needed. The healing came slowly in small steps and setbacks. Frank hired a child psychologist specializing in trauma, and Princess began weekly sessions. There were nightmares, panic attacks, days when she couldn't bear to be alone. But there were also good days, days when she laughed at something on television, when she asked to help Frank cook dinner, when she fell asleep peacefully without waking up screaming. Frank attended his own therapy sessions, though he told no one about them. He had spent so long being the strong one, the provider, the man who solved every problem through sheer force of will. Learning to acknowledge his own trauma, his own vulnerability, was harder than any business deal he had ever closed. But he did it for Princess, for himself, for the future they were building together. 1 month after the courtroom confrontation, Frank and Princess returned to Oakwood Cemetery. The autumn had deepened, the trees nearly bare, their branches stark against the gray November sky. Fallen leaves carpeted the ground in shades of brown and gold. They walked together, hand in hand, until they reached the small marble headstone that had haunted Frank's nightmares for 6 months. Princess Grace Harrison, beloved daughter, forever 9. The grave was empty. It had always been empty, nothing but a lie carved in stone. Frank had brought a sledgehammer from the garage. He set it on the ground beside the grave and looked at his daughter. "I used to come here every week," he said, his voice raw. "I would kneel right where you're standing and beg God to let me die so I could be with you again. This stone, this lie, almost destroyed me." Princess reached out and touched the cold marble, tracing the letters of her own name. "They wanted to bury me," she said. "Not just in the ground, but in everyone's memory. They wanted to make me disappear so they could take everything from you. But you didn't let them." Princess shook her head. "Neither did you." Frank picked up the sledgehammer and handed it to Princess. It was heavy, too heavy for a 9-year-old to swing effectively. But this wasn't about effectiveness. It was about closure. Princess gripped the handle with both hands, lifted the hammer as high as she could, and brought it down on the headstone. The impact sent a crack running through the marble. She swung again, and a chunk broke free. Again, and another piece fell away. Frank took the hammer from her trembling hands and finished the job. Swing after swing, he demolished the monument to his daughter's false death until nothing remained but rubble scattered across the grass. They stood together in the silence that followed, breathing hard, staring at the destruction they had wrought. Princess spoke first, her young voice carrying a weight far beyond her years. "I wasn't born to be buried, Daddy." Frank felt his heart swell with a mixture of pride and sorrow. Pride in the incredible strength of this child he had raised. Sorrow for the innocence she had lost along the way. He knelt before her one final time, taking her small hands in his. "And I will live to protect you," he said. "Every single day, for the rest of my life." Princess smiled, a real smile, the first one that had truly reached her eyes since before the nightmare began. "I know you will." Frank stood and took his daughter's hand. Together, they turned away from the shattered remains of the lie that had nearly destroyed them both. The morning sun was breaking through the clouds as they walked towards the cemetery gates. Behind them lay the rubble of a false grave. Ahead lay a future neither of them could have imagined just weeks ago. Uncertain, scarred, but filled with possibility. They didn't look back. There was nothing behind them worth seeing anymore. This, my dear friend, was not a story that ended with death. It was a story of resurrection, of justice, of the unbreakable bond between a father and his daughter. And as you've journeyed with us through this tale of betrayal and triumph, I truly appreciate you listening. If this story stirred something in your heart, if Frank and Princess's journey resonated with you, please consider subscribing to our channel for more true stories of incredible human spirit. And I would love to hear your thoughts, your feelings. What part of their journey moved you the most? Share your comments below, because your thoughts truly matters to us. Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable journey.